AITA for refusing to let my brother-in-law give my dad's eulogy. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. My bro and sis have always been much closer to each other than to me. My teen years were turbulent to say the least. Despite being the gifted kid, I performed poorly. I was expelled from school, would disappear for weeks, and eventually lived homeless in another state. When I became interested in becoming stable, I joined the military, but I make a poor soldier. I spent most of my time AWOL or mopping floors for going AWOL. I was a WOL and homeless again when my dad had a heart attack. I left the army and moved in and helped with his recovery. I went back to school and dropped out. Oh well, got a job, got married, had kids, and became a relatively stable person. I took a job at the same place Dad worked. He was beaming as I really started to shine there. It was a long commute via train and we spent a lot of time together. At work we would often sneak away together to grab lunch, go shopping, etc. Sis married a guy from my high school. He had been a good student while I was more the drug-addled narcissist. He'd apparently taken notice of me back then, but I had never noticed him. He's a decent fellow, and we got to know each other a bit when he started working and commuting with my dad and I. He was very ambitious, abandoned our train to drive in early, stay late, etc. and would often try to fix things about me in our conversations. It was clear we offended each other, but it was usually effortless for me to be passive about it. He tried to block some opportunities for me which upset me, but I was content to note that deep down he was sadly no true friend and just keep on keeping on. As long as my sis happy, I was doing fine. Later, I moved out of state to pursue other opportunities and a few years later tragedy struck. Dad died suddenly, and while I handled the news fine, when my bro-in-law asked to give the eulogy, I exploded. The thought of this vile person who refuses to see me as anything but an angsty teen giving my dad's eulogy. I confronted him. I was harsh. I was manic. I made a scene. It hurt my lil bro and scared sis. I eulogized Dad with notes the family hashed out together during the fog of it all. Afterward I took my bro-in-law for a long walk. By the end he seemed to understand my feelings and why his offer may have inappropriate. We were able to hug, etc. and the family was able to relax around us again. We've been back to contentedly ignoring each other ever since. I recently spoke to my bro and learned that he and maybe sis is still angry. He believes that I refuse to see some of the reality of the situation and that I should be ashamed. Despite reconciling somewhat with my bro-in-law, I still feel the same as I did back then. It's where I'm at emotionally, even a decade later. Story 2. WIBTA for calling CPS on my sister because I disagree with how she's raising her daughter. Making a long story short here, the day after Christmas, my 16-year-old niece, Emma, called me sobbing, begging to come live with me. She said her house was a prison and her parents wouldn't let her be happy anymore. We talked for a while and what she told me was confirmed as true by my sister when I talked to her. Emma has always had lopsided grades, with A's in English and history but CS and DS in math and science. This time last year, she was diagnosed with ADHD, which I knew because I was diagnosed a few years ago and my sister called me to ask my opinion on how well non-medication treatments worked since her husband was adamantly opposed to letting Emma take what her doctor prescribed for fear of her becoming addicted. Medication and intuitive living has always worked best for me, but when I was pregnant with my kids and couldn't take meds, I got by with the recommended ADHD diet, an exercise regime and a good routine. It turns out my Bill has taken that into hyperdrive and gone full prison guard on Emma's life in order to get her grades up. She has a strict routine that only includes school, studying, exercise, and family meal times. She is not allowed any contact with friends outside of school and eats a special diet that doesn't include dairy, caffeine, or sweets of any kind. Everything distracting has been taken out of her room, including all of her books and beloved paintings by my late mother. Her science and math grades have come up to BS, which my Bill insists means the routine is working but still can't be eased up on yet, since she hasn't come to her full potential. The incident that triggered her phone call: she stole her brother's phone while he was sleeping because she's not allowed a phone or unsupervised computer time, was her being banned from celebrating Christmas with the family, since it would be a deviation from her routine. I feel like this has fallen into awful territory and has only gone on so long due to the current craziness. I got my sister on the phone, and she broke down crying, saying that she's begged her husband to ease up but that openly instituting a lighter set of rules or telling Emma to ignore him will absolutely lead to a divorce. She says she's weighed the options, and since her husband would definitely get 50-50 custody of the kids, spurring a divorce to get Emma out of Bill's rules half the time for the next 2.5 years of high school isn't worth the kids being in a broken home and losing her kids half the time, especially with the other two still just 13, and 10. She said she'd work on him, but according to my nephew, my bill has been even harder on Emma since he found out we talked. I think CPS and the school need to be aware of this, but my dad says it's not against the law to be strict, and my husband says I would be wasting resources calling them since it's not serious enough for the courts to get involved. I just don't know what else to do. I feel like CPS could at least get Emma real treatment. Story 3. AITA for saying I miss it being just me and my dad. My mom died when I was 16, female was 6. My dad remarried when I was 11. He fell in love hard and fast with his wife and they got married 6 months later. She had 3 kids ages 6, 7 and 9 at the time. It was a lot for me. Everything is so much more. Things are louder and busier and there are so many more people and I was never excited like they were, but I never wanted to say anything, so I kept my mouth shut and let things happen for my dad, who was so happy. On the inside I was hurt though. I was hurt that my dad seemed to be so eager to leave everything behind when he got remarried. We no longer did pizza after school on Friday. We no longer watched something together on Sundays before bed. Everything had to, including everyone, and when I would ask to do something just with my dad he would say no and look confused. One time my dad asked why I was so eager to do stuff with him but never cared about family time, and I said because I missed him. He said I never lost him. Then back in October last year they put us all into family therapy because for one of my classes we had to design something in computer class. I was given a family tree, did the family tree of my dad, mom and me and then grandparents, etc. My teacher showed my dad it at the PT conference because of how good it was, and he and his wife freaked out about the steps not being included, and so family therapy happened. First therapist was a dud, second one didn't make anyone feel comfortable. And then when we were supposed to start with the current therapist, COVID hit and we couldn't do them from home, so we started in July or August, can't remember when exactly now. Then she was good and so I opened up, but I don't think they handled it well. 4 sessions and I was asked why I was distant. I admitted I found it hard. I felt like everyone else was so happy and I didn't want to rock the boat, but it was too much for me and I missed when it was just me and my dad, because that's when it was most comfortable for me. She asked what I missed about it. I said it was the time I got with my dad, the fact it always felt like home, and it has felt less like home since more people joined the family, and I have felt bad about it, but it was a lot going from 3 to 2 for so many years, and then we went up to 6 overnight. And it was all so fast and they were so eager and started calling me their sister and daughter right away, but I didn't feel that way, and then my dad stopped doing our stuff together and I felt like I lost him. My dad said he was hurt I wasn't happier for him and that I didn't give it more of a chance before rejecting them. My stepmom was hurt that after 5 years I hadn't warmed up to her and her kids enough to feel like they were part of my home. The therapist said how I felt was valid and asked why they felt like what I said was bad. And we have been going around in circles since. AITA. I feel like I should have stayed quiet because now they're just mad at me. Edited. I tried talking to my dad yesterday, and it did not happen. He told me he needed space, so they're still pissed. I also want to address that I never said I needed to keep my dad all to myself. I wanted him to be happy, but I wanted him to want to spend time with just me too. It didn't have to be all the time, but twice a week or even once a week alternating our old traditions would have been good, or even bi-weekly. But there was nothing, and when I asked I was told no. He's my dad. He's the only parent I have left and it feels like I was abandoned by him. Having more people around didn't make up for that. They could never make up for what I had with my dad. But our relationship is gone. It didn't have to stay the very same, but it's just gone. Story 4. AITA for leaving the call when my brother announced that his GF is pregnant. My brother and I do not get on. When we were younger he'd go out of his way to make my life a living hell. To my parents' credit, they did tell him off for it when they caught him, but they both worked long hours and didn't have the energy to deal with our arguments. This continued into adulthood. He was salty that he failed his college course the first time around. There was a bad argument in our family a while ago and, I shit you not, it all started because I refused to decorate my brother's living room. I won't go into too much detail, but he wanted a pretty hefty discount. I said no and he threw a tantrum. You really need to meet my brother to understand just how bad he is. But hopefully this post will do it some justice. Instead of being a grown-up and talking to me, he decided to hook up with my toxic ex-girlfriend and the mother of my child. Due to the rules here I can't go into a lot of detail about what she was like, but she was not a nice person. She never really bonded with our son when he was born and I was left to do everything by myself. She eventually walked out on us and refused to have any contact with our son. She'll post on Facebook now and then about her beautiful baby boy to get sympathy votes, but that's about it. I have been a single dad for almost 3 years now and I absolutely adore my son, but it hurts to think that one day he might question why his mom didn't want anything to do with him. How am I supposed to explain that to him? Anyway, it bothered me when my brother told me they'd hooked up together. It hurt even more when he started dating her. It had taken me so long to get over what she did to me and my child, and now my own brother was bringing her back into my life. Yesterday we had a family video call. Parents are high risk and we're not taking any chances when my brother decided to announce that he and my ex were expecting. I just froze. I didn't know what to do or think. I could feel myself starting to cry a little bit and it got a bit harder to breathe. Eventually I decided to just congratulate them and then made up some lie about needing to put my son down for a nap, and left. I received a bunch of messages from my brother and his GF telling me that I stole their thunder. After I left, my parents and some other family members started worrying if I was okay and not really focusing on their news. My uncle told me that I should have just been a man and stuck it out instead of making excuses to get out of it. After all, it was expected that our kids would be raised around each other. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have left the call, but at the same time it would have been worse if I'd stayed and had a full-blown panic attack in front of everyone. Some of the family members are split and have argued that I won't be able to avoid my brother and his family forever, but others believe I was in the right to leave that situation. I don't know what to think. Edit. I just wanted to say thank you first of all for all the support. I fell asleep last night and woke up to so many kind and supportive comments. A lot of people have been asking how my parents feel about this. They aren't happy, but they don't have the energy to deal with all the hassle my brother would cause. They actually cut him off for a little while when he started dating my ex, but he phoned them constantly and, again, can't go into much detail, but he said he'd do something not so good. They keep him at arm's length, but I have told them not to cut contact because of me. If they want to cut contact on their own accord, then that's fine, but I do not want to be the reason that they have to deal with his tantrums. The rest of the family, for the most part, weren't happy about it but accepted it or pretended to when they started getting a bit more serious. My uncle, who told me to be a man, thought it was funny. That's just the kind of person he is. I think, as hard as it might be, I am going to cut off contact with my brother and ex. As a lot of people pointed out, not for my sake but for the sake of my son. I don't want to put him through all that. Sorry I can't reply to all your comments, but I've been trying to read them all. Thanks again, Reddit.